There are races in this sport where the prize money alone can make grown men go quiet, where legends are built in 2.5 minutes, and where, for most of history, one rule was unspoken but absolute. The biggest races belong to the boys. The biggest, strongest, most expensive male champions the world could buy. Then a bay filly from a small English yard walked into the middle of that world and rewrote what everyone thought was possible. But here's the part almost nobody remembers. A year before she became a legend, this same horse was hurt badly enough that the people who knew her best weren't sure she'd ever race again. Not weren't sure she'd win again, weren't sure she'd race again, period. This is the story of Unable, and how a horse nobody was supposed to remember became one nobody will ever forget. Unable wasn't born into hype. She wasn't the horse the racing world had circled in red pen before she'd even set foot on a track. She was a bay filly, trained quietly in England, and for a while, she looked like exactly what people expected. Solid, promising, nothing more. Her first taste of competition didn't scream destiny. She was strong, she was sound, but strong and sound doesn't fill stadiums. In a sport obsessed with pedigree and early brilliance, Unable had to do something rarer. She had to earn it, one race at a time, the hard way. Then came the moment everything changed. On a rain-soaked afternoon at Epsom, in one of the sport's great trial-by-fire races for elite fillies, Unable didn't just win. She dominated, splashing through the mud like the conditions didn't apply to her. It was the kind of win that makes people in the stands stop checking their phones. That win put her on the map, but it also set up a much bigger question, one that would define the rest of her career. In racing, fillies and colts don't often meet. They run in their own lanes, their own divisions, their own separate worlds, built to protect the weaker sex from direct comparison. When a filly does step into open company against the strongest male champions on earth, it's treated as a novelty, a curiosity, almost never as a real threat. Think about how rare that setup actually is. Horse racing has spent centuries organizing itself around separation. Colts here, fillies there, rarely the two meeting on truly equal terms. It's not written down as a rule so much as an assumption baked into the whole structure of the sport. Fillies get their own championships, their own showcase races, their own version of glory that quietly sits one tier below the open competition. Nobody says it out loud. They don't have to. The schedule says it for them. Unable was about to make that assumption look foolish. Here's the part of the story that almost never gets told, because underdog stories usually skip the part where the underdog nearly doesn't make it back at all. At the peak of her powers, right when she should have been racing toward the biggest stage in the sport, Unable's season came to an abrupt halt. An injury, serious enough that it wasn't just going to cost her one race. It threatened to cost her everything she'd built. Think about what that actually means for an athlete. Not a slump, not a bad performance. A body that stops cooperating right at the moment it matters most. For a racehorse, that kind of setback doesn't come with a simple recovery timeline and a return date circled on the calendar. It comes with uncertainty, months of careful, deliberate rehabilitation. No guarantees, no promises that the horse coming back would be the same horse that left. Her team had a choice most people never talk about in sports documentaries. Bring her back slowly, protect what was left of her career, ease her into smaller, safer company, where the risk was low and the pressure was lower. Nobody would have blamed them. Instead, they did the opposite. When Unable returned, her connections didn't send her out for a gentle tune-up. They pointed her straight at the deep end, the biggest, richest, most unforgiving stage the sport had to offer, against the best horses on the planet. Male and female, no excuses, no easing in. It was either going to be one of the great comebacks in racing history, or a very public, very painful mistake. To understand what happened next, you have to understand what this race actually means. The Breeders' Cup Turf is one of the crown jewels of American racing, a race where owners fly their best horses across oceans for a shot at a purse that runs into the millions, against a field stacked with international champions. It is, by reputation and by history, a colts and older male horses race. The kind of race where a filly showing up isn't expected to contend. She's expected to be there for the photo. Unable showed up to win. She didn't sneak through on a slow pace or catch a lucky trip. She ran down the world's best older male champions in open competition and beat them outright. A performance that didn't just surprise people, it silenced them. A filly, freshly rebuilt from an injury that nearly ended her career, standing in the winner's circle of one of the richest turf races on the planet. And then, instead of stopping there, instead of taking the win, protecting the legacy, and stepping back into safer, gentler company, Enable's team did something almost nobody does. They went again. Same season. Same relentless European campaign that had already tested her against the best male horses in the sport's most historic middle-distance race, where she'd already proven she could run down champions twice her size. By the time that year was over, Enable had done something no horse in the history of the sport had ever managed, winning Europe's most prestigious all-aged race and America's richest turf championship in the very same year. Not a fluke, not a asterisk. The first horse, filly, colt, mare, or stallion, to ever pull off that exact double. Put the money in perspective for a second. These aren't races with modest purses and a nice trophy. These are races where the total prize money rivals what some of the competing horses are worth on paper. It's the kind of stage where owners spend fortunes just to get a horse into the starting gate. And Enable didn't just get into the gate. She walked out with the trophy. Here's why this isn't just a nice stat buried in a record book. For decades, the idea of a filly beating open company male champions was treated as an anomaly, something you mention almost as an apology, for a filly, qualifier tacked onto an otherwise ordinary sentence. Enable didn't leave room for the qualifier. She didn't beat male champions for a filly. She beat them, full stop. And remember where this all started. A year before her signature triumphs, this was a horse whose own team wasn't certain she'd ever compete again. The comeback wasn't just physical. It was proof. Proof that whatever version of Enable existed before the injury, the version that came back was better, sharper, hungrier. The setback didn't diminish her legacy. It's the reason the legacy hits as hard as it does. Talk to people who follow this sport closely, and you won't hear Enable's name discussed as one of the greatest fillies ever. You'll hear her name in conversations about the greatest racehorses, period. No asterisk, no qualifier, no separate category. That distinction matters. It's the difference between being remembered as an exception and being remembered as a champion. And she didn't stop there either. In the seasons that followed, Enable kept showing up on the sport's biggest stages, adding win after win to a resume that already didn't need the help. Most champions get one defining year before injuries, retirement, or simple bad luck catch up with them. Enable kept going, kept winning, and kept forcing the sport to update its own definition of what a mare could achieve, long after most horses her age had already been retired to a quiet life in the paddock. So here's the full circle. A horse who wasn't supposed to be a superstar. A horse who nearly lost everything to an injury that would have ended most careers quietly, with no fanfare and no comeback story at all. And instead, she came back to do something no horse in the history of the sport had ever done. Conquering the world's biggest stages, against the toughest male champions alive, in the same unforgettable year. The boys had every advantage: size, power, reputation, money behind them. She had one thing they didn't, something to prove. And that was enough. If you want more stories like this, the underdogs, the comebacks, the horses that shouldn't have won and won anyway, hit like button. Because there are a lot more where this came from. And if you're just getting started in this world and want a straightforward guide to owning your first horse, check the link in the description for the New Horse Owner's Handbook.